Hey everyone, welcome to this reading of Semper Die. I know a lot of people have been asking me about the audiobook, if it was going to be ready yet. I don't know what the timeline is on that. This is a traditional publishing book, so I'm not in control. But they did say I could do some YouTube live readings. This was going to be a YouTube live, but YouTube apparently has a 24-hour requirement to verify that I'm human, though they took my money when I purchased Premium a couple months ago. So, I have to do this one not live, and then the future iterations will be live, and you guys can join me then. So I'll go ahead and get started reading Semper Die, and hopefully you guys will enjoy. This will not be perfect, there will be some mistakes. I don't really care, I usually edit those out when I do audiobooks, but you get to hear all the mistakes. Alright, here we go. Semper Die. Written and narrated by Jonathan Shuerger. Prologue. It is a truth universally acknowledged that in the nightmare of the zombie apocalypse, the pizza boxes die first. Oh, come on, that was a good line. Cut me some slack, it's my first time writing a book, and Jane Austen is one of the few books that can be reliably gotten. Took me forever to come up with it. Guess I should probably tell you what a pizza box is, huh? You can probably tell, I'm new with the writing thing. A pizza box is the lowest qualification rank on the rifle range. The emblem is a square with a bullseye set on it. The few, proud and brave, call it a pizza box. And pizza boxes dying is not an operational doctrine, it's a cold fact. Every shot counts now. We have thousands of cannibal freaks roaming around, swarming to rip and feast on anything living they can reach. The chaff is getting sorted from the wheat real quick, and the low scorers with their accompanying excuses are dying out like lightning bugs in an air fryer. The Marine Corps never had the most numbers. We like that expeditionary lifestyle. Light, fast, and set to blast. But since July 4th, 2016, we're an even smaller, leaner corps. The fat's been cut. The malingerers and waivers we had are dead by now, torn up by Brother Z, or shot for dereliction under the new UCMJ. Only ones left now are the killers, and that's how we like it. So, to all that hear these presents, greetings. My name is Sergeant Alexander Slaughter, 0331 machine gunner in God's majestic Marine Corps. Yeah, I know. Al Slaughter. The instructors at SOI heard my name and immediately made me hump the M240. They thought it was funny. This is the record of Alpha Squad, Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, 2nd Marine Division. We're being incentivized to write these. Apparently, the few nerds that survived the collapse want to compile a history of the day overpopulation stopped being a problem. Ordinarily, I'd say screw 'em and do something useful with my time, but they're paying me an extra $100 every 2 weeks for it. I've done worse for less, to be honest, so here we are. Before I dive into it, a couple of things. This record will be true. I may not paint every Marine in it as a hero, but none of them died as cowards, and I'm not lying about any of them. My integrity means something, and I'm not selling my honor so nerds like you read this. And the other thing. Gunny Hudson didn't allow profanity in the squad. Therefore, it will not be present here. That man may be gone, but I ain't seen his body, and there's a track record now of the dead getting back up. Chapter 1. Monday, July 4th, 2016. 1937 Zulu time. Check. Something banged in the back of the Humvee. Sounded expensive. They're not answering. That's not what I friggin' asked for, was it, Marine? Check. Whatever, man. Whiskey, Oscar, Quebec. Whiskey, Oscar, Quebec. This is Lima Charlie Delta. How do you read? Over. Next to me, Gunnery Sergeant James Hudson wiped his forehead with his cami sleeve and heaved his weight onto the reluctant battery. We already had the passenger seat taken out of the truck to get at them, but something had warped the housing on this particular Humvee, and it was a battle to wrench the dead unit out. You'd think Motor T could hit it with some pliers, but then again, it was a miracle any of our Gulf War era Vics were operational. I chose not to question and or anger the dark sorcerers who kept our 30-year-old junk from falling apart. Gunny's face screwed up in effort as he pushed on that battery, and I reached over to shove on it myself one-handed. Come on, you stupid son of a... Language, Sergeant. Gunny warned, his voice strained. Aye, Gunny, I responded, trying not to roll my eyes. We're in the United States Marine Corps, Gunny. Profanity is professional. Gunny's eyes narrowed for a second, then he punched the battery. With a chunk, the battery slipped into the housing. There we go, Gunny said with a grin and a groan. You can pound on that all you want, but self-control with the right touch will win every time. I had to smile back. Aye, Gunny, I said. You write fortune cookies too? No one asked you, Sergeant, he said. Go check your Marines. I'll get the seat back in. I chuckled and said, Oorah, Gunny. I headed to the back of the Humvee, where Alpha Squad's comm specialist, Lance Corporal Dakota, hunkered over the radio, headset over his ears. The device was unspeakably ancient. Paul Revere had probably warned Concord and Lexington with this exact PRC-117. The thing was basically gasping dust from its housing, but our S6 necromancers refused to let it die as long as it could be useful. I shook my head, wondering at how everything could go so wrong. One more thing. This exercise had gone foobar in pretty much every way possible. We were on loan from Camp Lejeune to the basic school, helping birth some brand new baby officers into the world just before July 4th weekend hit. Well, the LTs were morons, big surprise, and one of the Vics they checked for us had a bad battery unit. Friday, the day we were supposed to index, 1st Fire Team's Humvee refused to start. We tried to jump it. No good. It was dead, not the kind that could come back, ironically enough. This started a cascade of wondrous military efficiency. We called back for a new battery, but the corporal on range control was too busy swapping sex stories with his buddies to pass the info on. By the time that ASVAB waiver remembered to pass on our request, Motor T had released early for the weekend, leaving one poor private, lowest on the totem pole no doubt, to check us in whenever we got back. Unfortunately, no one gave the kid the keys to the equipment cage, and his sergeant had turned off his phone, no doubt getting wasted already. We therefore camped in the middle of the range for 2 frigging days, waiting for someone to show up and give us a battery. Leaving the Vic on the range wasn't an option. If the local sergeant major, aka Sag Madge, caught wind of us abandoning gear in the field, he'd rip the elasticity out of our virgin rectums. So, we stayed. Naturally, the LTs were already on their well-deserved liberty, leaving us dumb schmucks to make our MREs stretch a couple extra days while we camped in the middle of a TBS range. Thank God for Gunny Hudson. I'd wind up saying that a lot in the next couple of days. Gunny was an instructor for a different class of LTs than the one we were supporting, but once he caught wind of our situation, that man dropped his barbecue tongs and powered back to base. Somehow, he conjured some keys for the battery cage, or, more likely, broke the lock, knowing what I know now, grabbed a couple batteries, and drove his personal SUV onto the range to hand-deliver the gear. You can't find staff NCOs like that anymore, and every Marine in the squad felt a surge of immediate loyalty and protectiveness. Offers of free chow and/or sex acts showered onto Hudson like rice at a wedding. Of course, he acted like he didn't care. Anything for my Marines, he said, and that was that. I miss him. Anyway, just to add on to the deluxe crap cake stack, now range control wasn't responding with our permission to exit the range, and Lance Corporal Dakota was starting to look a little upset. How's it coming? I asked. Dakota slumped and held up the headset. I don't know, Sergeant. 1200, I got a response. 1300, no response. I've been checking every 5 minutes since. Corporal Sloan leaned against the back of the Humvee, his thumbs hooked in his vest as he rhythmically banged his Kevlar against the metal of the Vic. I think his azimuth's wrong. Wasn't wrong an hour ago, Corporal, Dakota shot back. And we haven't moved. Whatever it is on their end. Sloan shrugged and glanced at me. You get the battery in there, Sergeant? I grinned at him. Always do. Tight fit, just like always, but nothing some tender love and lube can't help. Sloan smiled, his dark eyes tired. He'd pulled 2-hour-long watches last night, spaced out 3 hours apart, and his monsters had run out a couple days ago. From the wad in his lip, he was sucking on some MRE coffee grounds to stay awake. I thought I heard violence, Sergeant. Yeah, that's how Gunny's generation showed love. Go over there. He says he loves you too. Sloan shook his head. Nope, I'm good. That's what I thought. Get us packed up. We're hitting the road. Heard, he said with a sigh of relief. He pushed off the truck and shouted, Alpha, load up! Groans and curses met his words as Alpha Squad lurched to their feet. Packs lifted off the ground and landed in the back of Humvees, while Corporals Sloan, Garrett, and Martinez paced around, taking accountability of weapons and serialized gear. 4 Marines piled into each of the 3 Humvees. Our Navy corpsman, Doc Ramon, elected to ride was second. The mutters were heartfelt. Finally. Thank God. Hey, you think Gunny needs a girlfriend? I don't think he's into used gear, Sanchez. Shut up, Ferreira. As I walked past 2nd Fireteam's Vic, Lance Corporal Ferreira stuck his head out the window and shouted, Hey, Sergeant, when we get our phones back? I answered, Soon as we get back, Furry. He grinned, doing the stupid head bob that made him look like a grade A retard. Oorah, Sergeant. I continued, not missing a beat. And after we clean weapons, turn them in, clean the Humvees, turn them in, and hold a safety brief. The smile dropped off his face. Man, why you gotta do that to me? My girl's waiting on me. Because I feed off of sadness and fear, Lance Corporal. And because your right hand will always forgive you for making it wait. Now stick your grape back in your cage and lock it up. With a grumbled aye, Sergeant, he complied. I rounded the Humvee to see Gunny Hudson leaning on it. The seat was already back in and the dead batteries stowed in his Vic. Good to go? He asked amiably. Yes, Gunny. Again, can't thank you enough for this. A stern look came over his grizzled face. Shouldn't have happened in the first place. I'll have a talk with Hauptmann about his class leaving you high and dry like this. They're going to learn how to be leaders of Marines, I promise. I grimaced. I almost felt bad for those baby LTs. But not really. Behind us, engines growled as the HMMWVs started up, every last one of them idling roughly. He slapped the hood of the Humvee, shouting to be heard over the engine roar. That's our cue. Let's get you back and get you some hot chow. Ride with me. You got it, Gunny. We synced up comms, performed basic vehicle checks, and pulled out. It took about 45 minutes to hit the gate from the range. We trucked along old roads, the sunlight gleaming through the leaves of the trees with noonday rays. It was July, but it wasn't freaking hot yet. Not like 29 Palms or Yuma. Of course, it wasn't Pendleton and its sandy beaches either. That would have been sweet, but God didn't love me that much. The first inkling we had of the FUBAR situation to come was an abandoned truck on the side of the road, pointing the other way. It wasn't an HMMWV. It was a civvy white Ford F-150, one of the 3 models of vehicles Marines bought themselves with their boot camp pay. It was pretty, too. Gunny grunted. Must be an NCO model, huh? I grinned. With shiny rims like that? Yeah. Something kind of itched at me about it, and I turned back to look as we passed. I didn't see anybody around it. Gunny. Yeah, Sergeant. I hiked a thumb that way. Why are they heading downrange? Gunny opened his mouth, then closed it. It was July 4th Liberty. There was no reason to go onto an active training range unless they were bailing idiots like us out. His steely green eyes flicked in the rearview mirror to watch the truck receding in the distance. And why is a pretty truck like that abandoned? After a minute of silence, he growled. Call it in. Let law enforcement take care of it. I nodded and pulled out my cell. He and I were old GWAT, Global War on Terror, with several Afghanistan and Iraq deployments between us. Abandoned VICs were pretty much always VBIDs, our vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices. We might be stateside, but we'd lost too many friends in places they were supposed to be safe. Law Enforcement Battalion was probably bored out of their minds right now anyway, since all the Lance criminals were off base wrecking civilian jurisdiction. I found LE in my contacts, mashed the screen, and settled into my seat. Ring. 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 Nothing. I glared at the screen. Ring. 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 Gunny glanced at me. They haven't picked up yet? What else do they have to do? I checked my phone. Plenty of bars, no lost connection. They just weren't picking it up. That makes 2, I said slowly. Marine units not responding to call-ins. Range now LE. Yes, Gunny said. Yes, it does. We drove on. I could hear the wheels turning in Gunny's head as the convoy proceeded. We hit nice roads, which meant Quantico proper. We were about 5 minutes out from Motor T at this point. Try fire, Gunny said, his voice grim. I was already searching it in my contacts list. Ring, ring, ring. Same thing. No pickup. My radio crackled. Sierra, Sierra, this is Lima Charlie Golf. How read, over? Gutierrez. I gripped the radio set on my vest and pressed the button. Lima Charlie Golf, this is Sierra, Sierra. What's up, over? Boss, is that smoke north? Over? I twisted to look that way. Sure enough, a black pillar climbed into the sky, marring the beautiful sunshine with a column of ink. Without warning, Gunny wrenched the wheel over and braked hard. The SUV skidded through some dirt and threw some rocks to the side of the road. I let out a yelped curse, but Gunny was so distracted he didn't even call me on it. His eyes were riveted in front of him. Behind us, the convoy fell in. The focus in his eyes jolted me. I turned to see what he saw. It was the gate. It was empty, and it was wide open. The gate to Quantico, America's brass throne, the country club of military mingling, where generals and CEOs contracted multi-billion-dollar weapons deals for the next round of freedom we lower schlubs were going to deliver. Both of us stared at this impossible, improbable, possibly illegal sight. There should have been minimum 4 unlucky Marines from LE or FAP units standing there, holding M4s, pistols on their hips, hating their lives and checking IDs while officer spouses demanded they call them by their husband's ranks. Instead, trash blew across the street, flying into empty guard huts with doors ajar. Sergeant. Yeah, Gunny. You got angels? I nodded grimly. Yes, Gunny, we do. Get 'em up here. Every time Marines go out on exercise, we take our weapons. For us infantry, that meant M4s. Unlucky Pogue still carried the longer M16s, but who really cares? The rifles would be Condition 4 while in CONUS, which means that we'd have mags in, but no rounds. No one wanted devils unaliving themselves or others on exercise. It still wouldn't matter when we got back. Armory would make us clean the rifles anyway, so they wouldn't have to do it. But still, since we were carrying several $100,000 of military-issued equipment, we assigned 1 Marine in every Vic to Guardian Angel status. Those Marines carried live rounds in the extremely unlikely scenario someone tried to hijack a Marine convoy, which still makes me chuckle with evil joy when I think about it. 3 Vics meant 3 Marines with 2 mags per. Each mag contained 30 rounds of 5.56. 180 rounds fired off by pissed-off, but suddenly excited Marines would ruin most carjackers' day. I liked for my fire team leaders to assign their own angels and just inform me who it was. It was a chance to give a new kid some responsibility, sober them up while on exercise. Of course, I'd vet those choices. I'm not riding with a dude whose mental was teetering on the cliff of insanity. This time, I had PFC Marshal, Lance Corporal Dominguez, and Lance Corporal Turner. I signaled the other Marines to hang back with the trucks. No reason to put Marines into live firing lanes holding empty rifles. Gunny stepped around his SUV, checking the chamber of a Glock 19 and racking the slide. I glanced at him. That's illegal, on base, Gunny. He gave me a wry look. So call LE. I conceded that with a rueful nod. The man had a way of making a point. Stays in the glove compartment most of the time. But, and he slid the weapon into the back of his jeans, just in case 3 separate Marine units aren't all jacking off at the same time while the gate is unmanned, I'll keep it here. I move forward, taking Turner's extra mag and slotting it in. All right, Marines, huddle up. We're Condition 1, but do not fire without my okay. Good to go? Aye, Sergeant, they chorused quietly. Clicks and snaps sounded as mags slammed home in the wells. Their eyes kept moving around, continuously scanning the area as they loaded. Good for them. They weren't stupid. I'm not kidding, I said. The last thing I need is to do paperwork on one of you idiots because you shot a general's wife on friggin' Quantico. Keep your fingers straight and off the trigger, hear me? Nods, and aye, Sergeant. Out of curiosity, Sergeant, under what circumstances would we open fire? Dominguez asked. Gunny joined the huddle. Under one condition only, Devil. If your life or the lives of your fellow Marines are in danger, he said, you kill. And you kill fast. That sobered him. Aye, Gunny. He glanced at me. Take him in, Sergeant. I nodded, feeling my muscles tighten with pre-combat tension. Oorah, Gunny. On me, Marines. Rifles to shoulders, eyeballs to ACOGs and sphincters clenched. The Marines of Alpha moved into Quantico. Chapter 2. Monsters. Smoothly and quietly, my ad hoc fire team moved through the gate. Turner and Marshall swept the approaches, their rifles moving in tandem with their sightline, their cheeks pressed to the stocks of their rifles. Whenever a weapon passed across a Marine, the muzzle dropped to the ground, then came right back up. Because we're professionals, and professionals don't want to get shot if they don't have to be. Marine Corps bases have a feel to them. Everyone says so. Going onto a Marine Corps base, you can sense the anger, the harshness of our culture. I can't tell you how many times I've heard an airman ask why we're so mad all the time. That's just our faces, man. And also, the Corps sucks. When we showed up a week ago, in our green service alphas and TDY orders fresh in hand, Quantico felt like an HOA run by Marine Corps brass. Officers everywhere, uniforms pristine, cars with the rank stickers on the windshields. It was a whole different world. The lawns were manicured, the sidewalks swept, the MPs straight-backed and perfect. It felt tight, tense, as if every eye judged you and waited for you to mess up so you could get punished. It kinda still felt like that now, but for a whole different reason. A grocery bag from the MCX drifted across the road before us. A puff of wind caught it and tossed it into the air, where it lazily turned as it sank back down to the asphalt. We stared at it. It was trash. On Quantico. The most uptight station in the Marine Corps. Back then, I was pretty sure the death penalty was still active for that kind of negligence. I got a bad feeling about this boss, Dominguez muttered. He was a good kid, still green, no deployments under his belt yet. Eager and teachable, and some kind of vow against alcohol, which prevented most stupidity Marine 03s can get into. I know NCOs aren't supposed to have favorites, so he's definitely. I glanced at him. You and me both, Dom. Head on a swivel, I said. Aye, Sergeant. We scooted across the street, knees bent, rifles covering every angle. Nothing living moved. But we saw some weird stuff. Doors broken in. Shattered windows. A car overturned on the lawn. Smoke rising in the distance. Sergeant? Marshall asked, his voice confused. I glanced over at him, saw him looking down. I shifted to join him, and soon joined his confusion, too. Splashes of rust-colored brown on the sidewalk, footprints and handprints both. Now that we were looking, we could see the same color on the green grass considered so sacred by sergeants major everywhere. What the heck? Marshall started to say. Belay that, Gunny said. We glanced at him, surprised at the order, but his face was hard. Keep control of yourselves. Keep an eye out. Whatever's going on, losing our heads isn't going to help. My guys glanced at me and I nodded. Gunny's right. Let's go. Something popped in the distance, very distinct, but I still didn't believe my ears. A few seconds later, again. That's an M9, Turner said. Staff NCO or officer, I said. Maybe they know what's going on. Blood and gunfire on Quantico? Dominguez muttered. This can't go wrong. We moved as a unit away from the blood, keeping our spacing tight. Gunny's sidearm was out now, and I didn't blame him. Whatever was going on was weird enough that getting in trouble for a sidearm wasn't likely to rank real high on our concerns. I clicked the radio at my collarbone. Martinez. A second later, first fire team leader's voice came over. Dad? You're not using call signs. How am I supposed to believe it's you if... Shut up. We're not playing Marines anymore, I said. We got blood on the ground, debris, and some gunfire in the distance. We're moving to assist whoever it is. Get the squad into the gatehouse and scavenge their extra ammo, if any. Break open the safe if you have to. Advise when you're done. Oorah, Sergeant. Heading out. We moved. Quantico did not improve the further in we went. There was trash everywhere on the streets, spilled garbage cans, blowing paper and wrappers. We saw streaks of browning blood on the sidewalks, a few hours old. An abandoned LE vehicle sat nearby, door open. "That's why law enforcement isn't answering," Gunny muttered. We checked the car. No weapon, no ammo. Whoever drove this had already stripped it. More pops. Closer together this time. Something screamed in the distance. "That didn't sound human," Marshall said, pointing a finger in the general direction. "If it bleeds, we can kill it," Turner muttered. "Lock it up," I said, before we got any jumpier than we already were. "Let's go." We covered the distance rapidly, bounding by twos. More gunfire sounded in the distance now, not just the pistol we were closing in on. The weapon fired again. Sounded close now. "It's on this block," Gunny said. We were surrounded by command element buildings. Windows had been shattered on several floors of the structures. Cars and trucks had slammed into one another, 3 of them turned over and still burning. The pistol fired again, close. Something howled in the distance, the sound weird and distorted by the echo. "That one," I said, pointing at a division HQ. "Move in." Marshall and Dominguez bounded up, each taking a corner of the entryway. The glass doors had been broken. I saw loose brass on the concrete. Turner, Gunny, and I surged through the door, stomping through the broken glass and kicking bullet casing across the floor. I shouted, "United States Marines!" And that's when we saw our first one. A man twisted around at the end of the darkened command hallway. Fluorescent lights flickered, flashing across him and turning him into some kind of horror character. It was impossible to make out any detail on his face, but he arched very strangely, craning his neck. He tilted his head, as if listening to us rather than looking at us. He hunched over instead of standing straight, holding his hands out like claws in front of him. I could make out the jeans and polo shirt he was wearing. Splashes of something dark discolored the garments. Bodies lay on the floor around him, unmoving silhouettes, at least 8 of them. He'd been hunched over one before we burst in. "Boss?" Turner started. Then the man started to charge. To be clear, this was not an ordinary run. I'd seen people respond to armed Marines barging into their civilian spaces. There's always fear, a shrinking back from the sheer volume we emit. I've seen rooms drop to the ground, people covering their heads, even crying. I had never once seen a man drop his head and barrel toward me on a straight line, arms pumping wildly, howling like asthmatic Satan. I made the call. My M4 barked twice before I could even think twice. The man jerked from center mass impacts and tumbled to the side, clawing at the wall next to him. The timbre of that weird yowl changed. I'd hit him in the lungs. My barrel dipped out of habit. "Sergeant!" Gunny yelled. I thought he was trying to chew me out for putting the guy down, so I twisted back to him to explain, but he wasn't even looking at me. Gunny Hudson marched forward, his Glock bucking in his hand and snapping shots off. I whipped back around and saw the thing struggling back to its feet. "Oh, you are kidding me," I said, and unloaded on him, jerking on the trigger non-stop. The dude blasted backwards as rounds tore through his chest. I must have shot him 8 times in 2 seconds. I moved up to him and aimed my weapon right at his forehead. This fracker was still moving, his arms and legs writhing on the floor. I pulled the trigger, slopping the contents of the man's skull out the back of his head. He finally stopped moving. Turner, Marshall, and Dominguez stood behind me, their jaws on the floor. "What was that, Sergeant?" Marshall asked. I shook my head, still shaken by shooting a fellow American. "I don't know. Adrenaline? Drugs, maybe? That can keep a guy up for a bit." Gunny squatted down next to the corpse. "He's not bleeding," he said quietly. I looked at him. "That's impossible. I shot him like 20 times. Gunny nodded. "Yeah, I see the holes. They aren't bleeding, though." Dominguez stammered. "What does that mean, Gunny?" "It means," I said as Gunny lifted himself back to his feet, "that this guy was already dead when we shot him." They stared at me. "What do you mean?" Marshall said. "He was already dead." Something howled upstairs, and in the stairwell next to us, we heard footsteps pounding down them. Something slammed into the push-bar doors, scratching at the metal. Then something else hit, and something else. A lot of somethings, all screaming. As one, we made the decision to back away, rifles raised, just as the door sprang open and a wave of people spilled out. I'm using the term people very loosely, because we could suddenly see these ones just fine. Their eyes were wide stares, devoid of pupils or irises, just sick red orbs glowing in the dark. Their skin had paled to translucence, which made a really nice background for all the blood crusting their mouths and fingers. Scarlet liquid fanned down the fronts of their chests, and they lurched towards us, snarling with bestial fury. "Marines, drop 'em!" I roared, and the muzzle flashes of 4 M4s lit up the room. Gobbets of wet flesh blew from the backs of our attackers, spattering against the wall and the faces of those in the back. The impacts rocked the crowd backwards, but none of them fell over. "They're not dying, Sergeant!" Turner yelled. "Keep it up!" I shouted back. The barrage of gunfire was intense. I was already mostly deaf. We formed a line of rifles, spitting lines of fire into the drugged-out horde. A second later, my bolt rammed back and my trigger clicked. Empty. Made sense. I dumped most of my mag into the first guy. I reached back, gripped Marshall's extra mag, and ejected my empty. I slammed the second one in, tapped the bottom just in case it didn't lock, slapped the bolt home, and sighted back in. Empty to full, 2.5 seconds. I was about to open back up when I heard the distinctive crack of M9 fire. The pistol barked behind us, and one of the attackers threw her hands up and toppled, a hole in her forehead. Another crack, and a red-eyed Marine in camis crumpled face-first onto the deck, his skull blasted out. "Headshots!" a gravelly voice roared, and involuntarily we adjusted our aim points accordingly. At the range of 8 yards, we popped their grapes like wet blisters, splattering gore across the white cinderblock walls. This had far more effect than center mass shots. Bodies hit the deck, sprawling and tangling those behind. When we were done, the bodies of 20 people, all that weird, sickly pale color, tumbled across the floor of the command hallway. We turned to see who our new ally was, and my heart sank. 3 chevrons up, 4 down, star in the center. That's how the ditty went. My drill instructors had screamed it at me and made me scream it back for 13 weeks on the island. Marines learned by the ditty, and you screamed the ditty. I was 14 years out of Paris Island. I did not scream the ditty this time, though I did very much want to scream. Instead, I said, "Good afternoon, Sergeant Major." Chapter 3, Condition 1. "Welcome to the show, Marines." That was how he greeted us. He had Sergeant Major rank on his camis, which he was wearing, despite the fact he should have been on July 4th Libo. His name tape read Hawk. Sergeant Major Hawk was a massive black Marine with muscled arms exploding out of sleeves rolled so sharp they could cut a Haji in half. There was nothing behind his eyes, nothing but the endless void of God's Marine Corps. We'd all seen it. First sergeants and sergeants major all had it. They'd been in so long, the Corps had ejected their souls like a spent mag and replaced it with the Marine Corps handbook. They lived to eat the lower enlisted alive and make second lieutenants piss themselves. All 3 of my lower enlisted stood straighter immediately. Hawk looked at them. "Good afternoon, Marines," he said in a voice way too deep to be human. "Good afternoon, Sergeant Major," they responded. He stepped closer to Marshall, his eyes locked under the kid's chin. Oh, crap, I thought. "How old is that shave, devil?" he rumbled. He had some scrabble, for sure. Marshall looked like he wanted to join the bodies on the floor right then. Couple days, Sergeant Major." "Couple days," Hawk repeated, his voice toneless. "And that's acceptable to you, Marine?" I stepped forward, my butthole clenching at the treatment to come. I mean, he was gonna light into me as a squad leader anyway. "Got stuck out on exercise before Liberty kicked off, Sergeant Major. It's not his fault. It was my call to reserve that water for drinking." Sergeant Major looked over at me, his eyes chewing me up and spitting me out, learning everything about me. "That so, Gunny?" Hudson nodded. "Yes, Sergeant Major. Bad battery in the HMWV. I just delivered them a replacement and brought them in." Hawk turned back to Marshall. You got your razor? Marshall nodded. Thank God he did. Hawk pointed. Get in the bathroom now and shave. You don't got water? Piss on the blade. It's not the end of the world yet. Marshall glanced at me. Aye, Sergeant Major. Check the stalls first, Hawk rumbled and turned away. They like to hide. Turner, I said, trying not to roll my eyes at the lack of priorities here. Battle buddy, go. Turner snapped a quick nod, then moved with Marshall to the male head down the hallway. They kicked in the door, checked it, then disappeared inside. A second later, I heard stall doors kicked open. Sergeant Major turned back to me and Gunny. So why are you here, Sergeant? I pointed at his sidearm. We saw the gate was down. LE and fire didn't respond, heard your shots. We came to check it out. You and every possessed maniac on the base, Hawk growled. You put so much gunfire out. Every one of those freaks will be here soon. I was rationing my shots, good to go. They don't respond to single shots. Not like they do to mag-dumping kids like you. Yeah, you're welcome, Sergeant Major, I bit off just before Gunny Hudson slid between us. Thank you, Sergeant, he said quietly. I'm sure the Sergeant Major is grateful for the assist. Before Hawk could unload on him, Gunny asked, Do you have armory access, Sergeant Major? We got a full squad of Marines at the gate that need rounds. All we have are Sergeant Slaughter's guardian angels, and they're running low. Hawk nodded slowly, his eyes still burning into me. Roger that, Gunny. Sergeant, radio your Marines and have them meet us here. He pointed at a map of the base, at an intersection a quarter-mile away. And Sergeant. Yes, Sergeant Major. Hawk's eyes pierced mine with age-old hate. Make sure they got shaves. Hold up, he said what? I closed my eyes and repeated. Make sure the guys have fresh shaves. The radio squawked. Yeah, I heard what you said, Sergeant. Is he out of his mind? I sighed. He's old core. Been too long in garrison. What do you want me to say, Martinez? Do it. Make sure it's done. Aye, Sergeant. Be there soon. Gonna have to share razors, though. I think infection is the least of your worries right now, I said dryly. Once Turner and Marshall got out of the head, faces freshly shaved and bleeding, we headed out down the street. Dominguez got off easy, but his baby face never needed shaving anyway. I, having experience with Garrison Marine Corps, shaved every day in the field, just in case I got called into a meeting with a bunch of snot-nosed lieutenants looking for something to pick on. We didn't see any more of the crazed people... We didn't see any more of the crazed people that didn't bleed on our way over. Most of the base was abandoned, since everyone was on July 4th liberty. Knowing what I know now, that fact probably saved our lives. We reached the armory just as the rest of Alpha pulled in with the Humvees. Sergeant Major pulled out an access card and swiped us in through the chain-link gate, then the armory itself. No Marines inside. Again, it was July 4th. I started giving orders. We need 5.56 and frags. Throw a few cans on the table so we can load mags, put the rest in the Vicks. Sanchez, Furry, grab boxes for your saws if you can find them. Grenades, go to Martinez. He'll dish them out. Turnbow, Stevens, you're on fire watch. You see any movement, anything, you call it out. The squad stepped to fast, without the belly aching that normally accompanied having to do anything associated with work. Having a Sag Maj around was a help sometimes. The Marines had the trucks loaded in 5 minutes, then gathered around the weapons cleaning tables to load their weapons. Each Marine took 6 mags and started pushing rounds down into them. I could hear the disquieted mutter as Turner, Marshall, and Dominguez shared the firefight in the HQ with them. I joined Gunny and Hawk at their table and started loading my own mags. Both of them were already on their 4th. The M4 looked like a freaking toy across Sergeant Major's huge chest. He had his phone out and had just tapped on a news feed. The volume was low enough that only we could hear it. Outbreak is everywhere, Janet. What isn't the government telling us? All I'm saying is we should remain calm and see... Hold on. Folks, we have a situation downstairs, and they're telling us to evacuate. A crowd is is forcing its way through the doors. Screams sounded in the background, with the sound of shattering glass and that same weird howl we'd already heard. "They're in the studio! Cut the feed! Cut the The phone went blank. "What," Gunny breathed, "is going on?" Sergeant Major looked grim. That was Richmond. My Twitter feed is full of the same. Something's hit us hard, and people are turning into animals. I've seen videos of civilians eating people in the middle of the street. And it's not just the U.S. It's all over the place. I looked from him to Gunny. "So what is it?" Sergeant Major shrugged. "Bioweapon, probably airborne. Al-Qaeda, China, or some corporate idiots. Doesn't matter." He looked from me to Gunny, his eyes blazing against his black skin. "Nothing's changed for us. We are Marines. We will confront this new threat, and we will emerge victorious." He pulled up a Maps app on his phone and showed us. "Last I heard from higher, a fallback point was established an hour west of here, at Belfair Crossroads. It's in the country, lower population, fewer affected individuals." Hawk looked at me. "That's probably what spared your squad, Sergeant. Being in the field." I felt my breathing go shallow involuntarily, and I took a deep breath to combat the anxiety. "Do you think it's still in the air?" Gunny spread his hands. "We're all okay. Most airborne pathogens deteriorate fast. If it is still spreading, it's not in the air anymore." Sergeant Major shrugged. "Or we're resistant." I glanced at him. "When did it start? Do you know?" "Heard the first reports this morning," he growled. "Listening to my podcast on my drive in at 0500. Didn't pay much attention. It was just all idiot libs in the cities protesting Independence Day. Locking streets, holding up traffic, climate change crap. Then more reports came out, and they all started sounding the same. Civilians biting civilians, unconfirmed reports of red eyes. By the time I flicked the news on, they said most of the camera crews in the affected areas were not responding." I twirled my finger in the air, indicating all of Quantico. "And here? Any kind of recall issued?" Hawk grunted. "All the Marines are on Libo, probably partying in Virginia Beach and drunk out of their minds." I nodded. "Phones are off." Gunny chuckled darkly. "If they have any sense." "Boss?" It was Martinez. He had one hand on his rig, the other on his rifle, and peered outside the fence. The Marines were with him, their voices falling to whispers. "You might want to take a look at this." I pushed away from the table and jogged over to him. The disquiet from our conversation was creeping up on me now, and I felt my body juicing with adrenaline. I was getting combat ready. "What's up, Martinez?" He pointed. "Check it out." I glanced where he showed me, back where we had collected the Sergeant Major from. Smoke from the distant fires blew across the base, reducing visibility to about 300 yards. But I saw what he did. Figures stumbled through the smoke, walking slow and stiff. "Those survivors?" Lance Corporal Turner asked. I raised my M4 and zeroed in on the closest one through the optic. It was a woman, typical officer wife type. Hot, great body, lots of time to go to the gym. If it wasn't for that incendiary scarlet gaze and the blood dripping from her teeth, I'd have hit that. Now I'd hit it for a whole different reason. I'm gonna say no. She was not alone. I could see silhouettes in the smoke. Dozens, at least. "What the actual?" Martinez breathed. Gunny cut him off. "Fireworks back in HQ. Must have drawn him in." "Marines," I said, dread digging into my spine with icy fingers as more and more silhouettes loomed out of the smoke. Into the trucks. Quietly. Mutters of kill and error came back to me. Alpha Squad jammed mags into their carriers, and the SAW gunners grabbed boxes for their 249s, feeding the chain to ammo into their weapons. "What's the word, Corporal?" PFC Sanchez asked Corporal Sloan. She was SAW gunner for 1st Fire Team, 5 feet 4 inches of pure Mexican firewater. She looked tiny next to her weapon, but she was good with it. "What condition we at?" "We are absolutely at Condition 1, Sanchez," Sloan said, glancing at me as he said it. I nodded, backing up his assessment. Get that baby ready to go. As quietly as possible, Lance Corporal Dominguez pulled the gate to the armory open, and the Marines filed out in sticks, barrels down, their eyes locked into the growing crowd in the distance. Gunny and Sergeant Major slipped into Gunny's SUV, where I joined them once the squad was loaded up. So far, so good. Then Turnbow tripped. His boot caught on something as he lurched forward, and he slammed into the chain link of the armory fence, rattling it. In the distance, Hot and Ready twisted toward us, her crimson gaze lighting like flares. She saw us. I know she did. Her mouth opened, and something inhuman came out of her mouth. It was a long, wind-sucking howl, echoing and rebounding like an ambulance siren. Then another joined it. And another. "That's it!" I yelled. "Into the trucks, now!" Red started for us, leaning forward into a stumbling run. She picked up speed, her arms whipping around her as she sprinted way too fast. Her legs stretched out like cheetah limbs, eating up the ground toward us. I whipped up my rifle and fired. The shot hit her between the eyes, and she hit the deck right after. I adjusted, got my sight picture on her boyfriend running nearby, and blasted his brains into the concrete next to hers. The horde emerged from the smoke. Hundreds of them, all with red eyes, all running straight for us. Rifles cracked off behind me as Alpha opened fire, and the thing started pitching backwards. "Slaughter!" Gunny roared. I sprinted for the SUV and threw myself into the back seat. I shoved a big plastic baby carrier aside, rolled the window down, and took a firing position. "Let's roll!" I shouted, trying to be heard over the howl and gunfire. Main gate was the other way. We had a U-turn to do in the middle of these red eyes. Gunny wrenched the wheel around and whipped the SUV into a tight turn onto the main road. All four vehicles took off, the HMMWV's engines roaring. The swarm of freaks came at us broadside, sprinting from the grassy field of a parade ground. First fire team, with Sloan, Dakota, Marshall, and Sanchez, were in the hardtop directly behind us. Then third fire team following, with Martinez, Turner, Gutierrez, the Doc, and Stevens in an old cloth top. Trailing came second, with Garrett, Dominguez, Ferreira, and Turnbow in our last hardtop. Humvees hit a max speed of about 60 miles per hour, and let me tell you, it takes a while. The mob streamed toward us far faster than the trucks could accelerate, howling like banshees the whole time. I snaked a seatbelt around my leg, buckled it in, and snapped it taut. I pulled myself out of the SUV window and faced to the rear, range combat optic to my eye, snapping off shots as fast as I could get targets. The horde hit us in seconds, covering a couple hundred yards in obscenely fast time. I jerked on the trigger as fast as I could, sending about a half a mag's worth of rounds down range and standard suppressing fire. But that's when it hit me. These things didn't care. They didn't even flinch as rounds zipped past their ears like angry hornets. There was no suppressing these freaks. It was hard enough to get them to stop when they died. The first runner hit second's truck with a loud bang and bounced off. I swore. There had been no slowing down, no attempt at all to mitigate impact. People don't do this. Not even the goat-humping Taliban slammed their bodies full tilt into armored trucks. He wasn't alone. 2. Their knees, thighs, anything that might trip them up. Second fire team's truck accelerated, crazed freaks hanging onto the windows with their blackened fingers, even as Marines dumped fire into them from inside. "Hang a right, Hudson!" Sergeant Major roared, and I braced as Gunny tore the SUV around a turn. The SUV bucked as it hit the curb, but it gave me and Sergeant Major firing angles at the mob surging toward us. Hundreds of them, doing that obscene howl, sprinted like Olympians after the trucks, stretching out like the tail of a comet. We opened fire, and blood spurted from chests and arms as 5.56 ripped through them. Freaks didn't stop. I saw one guy's arm get ripped off, which isn't supposed to happen with this caliber round, and he still didn't stop. First's Humvee took the turn, and their rifles joined ours, dumping hot lead into the pursuing crazies. Second was pretty much swarmed at that point, with several crazies actually crawling across the top of it and reaching in through the windows. Lance Corporal Dominguez had some outside martial arts training, and I saw him reach across, grab an arm, and twist. The crazy toppled off of the truck with a scream, scraping off another 3 with it. Third fire team did not fare as well. The attackers ripped straight through the flimsy cloth-top cover, diving on top of the Marines in the back seat. Doc got one on him that jerked its head back and literally buried its teeth in his shoulder like it was a cougar on a deer.
Next to him, two of them grabbed Stevens by his vest, ripped him out of his seat and out the back of the truck. A crowd of pursuers stopped running to fall on top of him, and blood sprayed out from under the thrashing melee. "Sergeant! Sergeant, they're eating him!" Sloan from First screamed into the radio. "Do not slow down!" I yelled back. Third's HMWV swerved left and right as Gutierrez tried to shake the running horde off. I sniped as well as I could, trying not to hit the Marines in the truck while still dropping crazies around them. My fire converged with the Marines from First, and hot lead tore the freaks still on 3rd Fire Team's Vic off to tumble into the street. Gutierrez stomped on the accelerator, probably breaking the pedal off as he did, and the Humvee shot forward out of the crowd, miraculously free of the maniacs running after them. I let out my breath, feeling relief at the sight of my Marines making it out. Then something terrible happened. Something awful. Life-altering. This was the second I knew the world had really, really changed. Doc Ramon, a Navy corpsman with 2 deployments under his belt and lots of Marine lives saved, rose from the back seat of the truck like a wolf prowling from its cave. Blood from the bites on his neck dribbled down his chest. His muscles quivered with unreal tension. But his eyes that arrested me. Bright. Red. I sucked in a breath to scream a warning, but the thing that had been Doc dove down on top of Gutierrez and clamped its jaws onto his throat. With a wrench and a twist, Doc ripped a chunk of the Marine's windpipe clean out of his neck. The last thing I saw of Gutierrez was his wide eyes, terrified and glazing, as Doc chewed on his throat, before the cloth top swung off of the road, hit a hydrant, and flipped over. A door kicked open, and Martinez and Turner tumbled out, firing into the interior of the truck. "Gunny!" I shouted, pounding the top of the SUV. "Turn around!" "Belay that!" Hawk barked. His head stuck out of the front passenger side, his eyes glaring into mine. Before I could say any of the 10 things or raise my rifle to shoot him, he growled in utter, bitter fury. "They're already dead, son." I turned back and saw Martinez and Turner stand to their feet, back to back, rounds cracking off nonstop into the horde around them. I watched with teeth clenched in jaw-cracking fury as the crowd leapt on top of them like animals and tore them apart. Doc was one of them. I saw Martinez crawling out from under the cab, eyes red and mouth drooling, to get him some. By now, we'd hit open road, and we were leaving the runners in the dust. Their frustrated howls faded into the distance. Right about then, the combat rush drained out of me, and I slumped down into the rear seat, my eyes stinging with tears, my hand over my mouth. We sped down the road in silence for a minute, until Sergeant Major said, "I'm sorry about your Marines, Sergeant." There was nothing I could say. I'd just lost an entire fire team, a third of the Marines entrusted to my care. As far as I was concerned, the world was over. Chapter 4. Crossroads. Officials strongly recommend that all civilians stay inside until military personnel arrive. Under no circumstances are any non-uniformed personnel to enter the highways. Evacuation of major population centers along the Potomac are underway, but as panicked motorists clog the major traffic arteries, the National Guard is struggling to respond to these attackers or provide assistance to those in need. Our experts recommend staying off the road entirely, and... The radio droned on. Civilians trying to sound professional and not scared for their lives at the insanity around us. Marines knew better. Never believe the government when they say everything's fine. "Just keep going straight, Gunny," Sergeant Major said quietly to Gunny. I could see his hands were white-knuckled around the steering wheel. "Take the 619 up to Belfair." Sergeant Major glanced back at me. "You with it, Sergeant?" I nodded. The cold in me was starting to fade. My blood burned now, and all I wanted to do was get back and start killing the freaks that had murdered my Marines. "Good," he said. "There's something about being a sergeant of Marines that activates on you, all the time. You spend that much time taking care of hyper-aggressive risk-takers, it doesn't turn off." So I said,
Gunny. His eyes flicked toward me in the rearview mirror. I tapped the kid's seat next to me, a plastic monstrosity that took up way too much room. Your family okay? He dipped his head in understanding. They're at my parents' farm, out in the middle of nowhere in Western Virginia. I sent them out there when I came to grab you guys. I nodded. Good, I said. Lots of guns out there. He tapped the phone in his side pocket. Already got a text from my wife. They're safe. Thanks for asking. Hoorah, Gunny. Sergeant Major tapped at his phone with a grimace, then stuck it back in his pocket. The 95's jammed, he said. Good thing they got out when they did. I glanced around. There was nothing out here. This some kind of back road? I asked. I didn't know. I wasn't from here. All I knew is we were heading west. Hawk nodded. Everyone's evacuating south. The 95 and the 1 are locked. He glanced away. Reports are coming in that the army's shooting civilians. I ground my teeth. I got it. Panicking civilians would overrun checkpoints, breach defenses, and even kill our guys. Not to mention any possibility of biological contagion protocols. Didn't mean I had to like it. What about D.C.? Gunny asked. We had all been thinking it. Hawk grunted. Dark, was all he said. It took us about 10 minutes to get to Belfair Crossroads. Seeing what was happening with the civilians on the 95, Gunny recommended we, being in Gunny's civilian vehicle, slide back in the convoy to the middle and let 1st Fire Team's truck be the first thing the checkpoint would see. It wound up being an amazing call. The first things we saw were the tanks, their massive 120mm aimed down the road at us. Marines in combat rigs and NVGs manned M240 machine guns on tripods. A single volley from any of those guns would shred our entire squad and blast the roadway clear. And that's why 1st Fire Team was in front. We slowed as we approached. Sloan had his military ID held out of the window, just in case. A Marine in Marpat stepped out into the road, one hand raised to stop us, the other on his M4. Sloan brought his truck to a stop, and their heads dipped together. I saw Sloan gesture back our way. The Marine, a staff sergeant, nodded and headed toward us. Gentlemen, he said, peering at each one of us. His eyes were hard. Judging by the scrape marks and blackened craters on the asphalt, along with some junked cars on the side of the road, we were not this checkpoint's first visitors. His name tape read, Harrison. Staff Sergeant, Sergeant Major Hawk said. He pulled out his ID and handed it over. Harrison checked the card, scanned it with his laser gun, and handed it back. Welcome to Delta Fob, Sergeant Major. He looked at the rest of us. We're Condition 1 right now, gentlemen. Keep track of your Marines and be ready to repel when called on. Gunny was the one who asked. Repel what, exactly? Harrison's lips pressed into a thin line. Whatever tries to get in. As soon as we had passed the checkpoint, I felt it. We all did. Gunny's hands loosened on the wheel, and he sat straighter. Sergeant Major actually growled in pleasure. There's nothing like the air of aggression in a Marine Corps camp on a combat footing. I've seen airmen flinch from Marines just standing in line at a Panda Express. There's nothing like Marines activated to kill threats to the United States. It's rage. It's anticipation. It's tension itself. Breathable, palpable, thick and intense, mixed with a cold shot of icy discipline. We were breathing kill. NCOs roared across the fob. Charlie, report to firing position, south side. Platoon, load up. Hydrate or die, Marines. Fill those hydration systems. Every Marine was armed. Rifles hung across their bodies, one hand always resting on some part of the weapon. Their eyes challenged us as we unloaded from our trucks, and the perennial challenge of every Marine to another who arrives in his space. You competent? You gonna get me killed? Mixed with, good to see other Marines made it. Immediately, security forces stepped up to us, weapons not quite trained on us. Hold! The Major barked. Navy corpsmen moved toward us, each one accompanied by a security Marine. Found the cops, Ferreira muttered, and Corporal Garrett shouldered him to be quiet.
The docs moved among us, checking eyes and taking pulses. "Any of you get bit?" One of them, a black guy named Jones, asked as he probed my neck. I gritted my teeth, trying to keep the rage in. "Not that made it here," I ground out. A flicker of understanding in his eyes. "So, this blood ain't yours?" he asked. I shook my head. "I'm still going to take a sample," he said. "That good with you?" He was asking to be polite, but he was already moving. That, and the MP behind him watching me with stone-cold eyes, told me what was going on. "Are we looking at some kind of infection?" I asked. Jones grabbed my wrist, twisted it to expose the forearm, and slid a needle into my vein with practiced ease. "Might be," he said. I looked down at him. "It is," I said, as intensely as I could. I remembered Doc Ramon's eyes, glowing red only seconds after he got bit. He met my eyes and nodded. "Thanks for the blood, Sergeant." "Hoorah, Doc." Around me, the docs finished up with Alpha. Everyone got blood drawn. Everyone got checked for superficial wounds, specifically bite marks. I had one more question. "Doc," I said quietly. Jones glanced back at me. "Yeah?" I felt awkward asking. "Look, I'm not trying to be weird, but is this, zombie stuff?" I wanted him to laugh. I wanted him to gather the other Marines around and mock me for such a stupid suggestion. Instead, he sighed. "I really hope not, Sergeant." I closed my eyes. "Not what I wanted to hear, man." Shouting rose from the checkpoint we had just passed. "I said halt!" Harrison's voice bellowed. In response, an engine revved in the distance. "Light it up!" Harrison shouted, and the 240s on the N1 Abrams opened up first. I dashed over to the barricade to see a civilian Toyota ripped to shreds, its engine block wrecked by a storm of 7.62mm rounds. Scarlet spattered across the inside of the windshield before it shattered. Then the main gun fired, shaking my lungs and my chest. The Toyota exploded into a fireball, backblasting burning shrapnel to skitter across the road. "Ceasefire!" the staff sergeant ordered, his lips pressed into that line again. He stalked back towards us, grabbing a water bottle and squeezing the contents into his mouth. I didn't say anything at first, letting him breathe a little after shooting what were probably Americans. "Isn't the 120 kind of overkill, Staff Sergeant?" I asked. Respectfully, though. You don't tell a Marine his job, especially in this scenario. He glanced at me, then at my Marines. He lowered his voice. "The first van we took out had kids in it." My blood froze. He wiped his mouth with the back of his glove. "Now, I blast them off the road so my guys don't have to know." I dipped my head, feeling the blackness again. "Rah, Staff Sergeant," I said quietly. He spat a wad of dip spit on the ground, punched a wall, and walked away. The blackness is what we feel in Afghanistan, or Iraq. Any place you have to do something your whole culture taught you was wrong. Like when you gotta drop a teen with a rifle, or a woman with a vest, or a kid running at you with a backpack. This darkness just comes over you as you violate everything you were ever taught is good and right and honorable to keep your Marines alive because the zealous bastards you're trying to save hate you because their religion's book said to. We shouldn't be feeling it here. Not here. "Sergeant!" I turned to see Sergeant Major Hawk standing behind me, his pitted face hard. "They want you in the command tent. Take your team, leaders." I think we'll do one more chapter on this video. Chapter 5. State of the World. I whistled at Garrett and Sloan and twirled my finger above my head. Both corporals jogged over to me. Together, we marched for the command tent behind the Sergeant Major. "What's the word, Sergeant Major?" I asked, trying to get a sense of what was going on. "Guess you'll find out," he said. I sighed. "Heard, Sergeant Major." I wasn't getting any more out of him. Sergeant Majors were like hardcore dads and cartoon characters put together, brimming with Marine Corps values and canned slogans. Then he surprised me. "I don't know, Sergeant." But it probably has something to do with you being the only Marines who've successfully engaged these new hostiles and come back to talk about it. He turned back to look at me with those steely green eyes. They told me to come grab you. I'm grabbing you. I'll find out more when you do. Heard, Sergeant Major, Garrett mumbled. He turned back and marched into the tent. Inside was a hectic mix of reports and comms gears. Wires ran all across the floor while hardened laptops sat on folding tables. Marines from S6 were still working to establish connectivity for the S2 guys still trying to get to their databases. Outside, I'd seen guys setting up antennas and generators. We marched toward a whiteboard, where an officer stood with his hands on his hips. God help me. Every time I meet an officer for the first time, he's Supermaning me. Feet spread, hips forward, chest out, hands on hips. If he had a cape, it'd be blowing in the non-existent wind. This guy was no exception. By the eagle on his collar and the name tape, I was looking at a Colonel Santiago. "Marines!" he barked out. As I approached, he shifted to arms crossed over his chest. I rolled my eyes inwardly. I'm a big guy. In terms of size, I look like a Marine. I got big genes from my dad's Nordic background and my mom's Italian temper. So Santiago stopped puffing up like a blowfish to intimidate me and retreated into his little turtle shell. "Good work, getting out of Quantico. UAVs show the entire bank of the Potomac was overrun by the enemy when you were escaping." He looked at me. "Sorry about your fire team, Sergeant." Never mind, maybe he was okay. He looked at us. "You are now the only Marines on Fob Delta that have experience fighting this kind of hostile. I need to know everything you know." I could feel Sloan and Garrett glance at each other. God help me, I was going to have to say the words out loud. "Zombies, sir." Santiago's glare could have drilled through diamonds. But he didn't chew me out like I thought he was going to. Or should. Instead, he asked, "Are you sure, Sergeant?" And I mean abso-friggin-lutely sure. I took a deep breath. It really, really bothered me that no one was pushing back on me on this. Hostiles showed no reaction to suppressive fire, chest wounds or limb loss, sir. The ones we dropped didn't bleed, indicating they were already dead. Their eyes are glowing red for some reason. And I lost 3rd Fire Team when our corpsman got bit and started attacking the rest of them. 1 second he was normal, the next he had those same red eyes. I kept my eyes locked onto his. "So it's zombies, sir." The colonel rocked back onto his heels and rubbed his eyes. "Should have played more Xbox with my kid," he growled. I didn't know what to say, but he looked back towards the whiteboard behind him. It had city names scrawled across it. As best as we can tell, the spread started in dozens of American cities early this morning. Most likely, devices set high in the air spread an aerosolized version of this virus, weapon, or whatever it is, and infected millions of Americans simultaneously. The spread was further amplified by the holiday weekend, with civilians packed together for the celebration of Independence Day. This contributed to congestion of the roadways, delay in emergency response, and inhibiting containment procedures. He looked at me. From video evidence we have from Twitter and other social media sources, it looks like the infected subjects turned feral and cannibalistic within seconds after infection. That match your experience, Sergeant? I and my team leaders nodded. Outstanding. Santiago turned back to his board. Whoever did this turned our own population into a weapon against us. He paced in front of the board. Sergeant, I'm going to be real with you. The chain of command has shattered. It would appear that one of these devices went off in Washington, D.C., and the last anyone saw the president, he was ripping out his wife's throat just before the camera went dead. The VP is MIA, presumed dead. Most of Congress was in D.C. for a publicity stunt on the Capitol. The 101st Airborne was mobilized to try to evac them out. I blinked. Who's in charge then? Santiago rubbed his eyes. As of this moment, unknown. That's something that has to be worked out once we know who's still alive. He glanced out the flap of the command tent. We're trying to gather all the Marines we can find. I've got a platoon calling through recall rosters, but the cell towers are overwhelmed. Most of our combat strength is on July 4th holiday libo, and a lot of them were in areas affected by the infection. My skin prickled as I realized the implication of that. Do we have an estimate on casualties? He chuckled helplessly, grabbed a remote from a nearby table and clicked it at a monitor. It showed a live UAV feed. That's DC, as of this moment. The drone feed showed a massive thoroughfare in the capital. The street was packed. Packed with red-eyed freaks. There were thousands of them, just in the field of the lens. Lance Corporal Jimenez, Santiago said. Pan the camera around. The Marine obeyed, and the camera started rotating on the drone. Behind me, Sloane swore quietly. It was millions. It had to be. I was looking at an uncountable number of civilians staggering through the streets of D.C. Fires raged in the buildings while cars burned on the sidewalks. Someone broke and ran from a doorway, and like a ripple in a pond, it activated the horde. They flowed toward the running meat like ants, swarming it and dragging it down like I was watching National Geographic. It was almost worse without sound. I felt the blackness rise up inside me again as I watched that writhing pile. I wanted to kill whoever did this to us. Santiago glanced at me in concern. My breathing had deepened to a growl, and I hadn't realized it. You all right, Sergeant? I lifted my chin. Yes, sir. What's the word? He hesitated for a minute, watching me, then sighed. I'm gathering all the Marines we have available here for a push through to Norfolk. We had a deployment loaded onto Navy vessels there, a full battalion from 2nd Division. They disembarked and shoved out a perimeter around the naval yards. Marines are holding the line, but we need to break through these, whatever they are, and reinforce them. After that, we have to evacuate anyone who's still alive, and Sergeant, there are thousands of them. FEMA's overwhelmed with the number of calls from families in their basements, in their attics, and in gated communities currently under siege. What can we do, sir? He sucked on a tooth, looking at me hard. Finally, he said, I got one for you, but you have to volunteer. Sloane swore behind me. Well, that doesn't sound good. It's not, Colonel Santiago said, but I've been ordered to detach a squad to support an extraction mission to Fort Detrick. Sergeant Major Hawk grunted. Detrick? That's bioweapons. Who gave that order? FEMA Deputy Administrator Whitney. Called me pretty much as soon as FOB Delta was established, claiming operational control over the disaster response. He sighed. I've got one Marine from legal here, and he says that technically, Whitney's in charge until the actual administrator is found. Someone from the executive branch takes command, or the designated survivor is found. Santiago leaned to look around me. Speak the devil's name, and he shall appear. We turned to see a civilian in a suit storm into the tent. He was white, overweight, and self-important. Classic sedentary desk job bureaucrat with a manicured line of mustache and goatee that couldn't grow longer if he tried. He had some stringy strands of hair hanging down that he probably tied into the world's most pathetic rat tail on the weekends. 2 plainclothes guards walked with him. I saw the telltale signs of weapons beneath their suit coats. Their eyes were dead as they assessed the room. Contractors, hired muscle, killers, in it for the money. Santiago, he said. He shoved his way past Sloane and Garrett, muscling his gut through them, and looked me up and down. This them? Mr. Whitney, Colonel Santiago said, his jaw tense at the man's tone. I was just about to explain the mission to these Marines and allow them to volunteer. Whitney squinted at us in disbelief and chuckled. I'm sorry. Did you say volunteer? I thought you were Marines. You do what you're told. You're going to Detrick. Discussion closed. He stuck his face in Santiago's. See how easy that was? Now snap to. I want them airborne in 10 minutes. The twit actually snapped his fingers in the colonel's face, and every Marine in the room tensed. The kill urge was overpowering at that point, and Sergeant Major Hawk stepped forward. You will adjust your tone when speaking to a Marine Corps officer, mister. He chewed on the word and spat it out. Whitney, please, Whitney said, glancing at his guards for support and grinning. "I'm acting FEMA director in a time of crisis. I'm God on earth for you boys right now, and if you disobey orders, I'll have you shot and strung up for everyone to see." He spat on the ground next to Hawk's boot. "Get your dog on a leash, Colonel. His bite is non-existent, and his whining annoys me." "Keep going," Hawk growled, "and you're gonna find out how bad my bite is." The Marines in the room were frozen. We had instinctual dread of sergeants major, the incarnations of Marine Corps doctrine and lethality, and seeing this civilian blithely dismiss the clear signs of he's going to peel you like an actual potato was hitting buttons on all of us. "Sergeant Major," Colonel Santiago said. That was all it took. Immediately, Hawk backed away a step and took his hand from his sidearm. I blinked. Holy crap, he'd unbuttoned the holster strap. He was about to pull down on this fat slob. 10 minutes, Colonel," Whitney said. "Get going." He turned and walked out, his guards 2 steps behind him. The colonel glanced at me and opened his mouth, but I lifted my hand. "It's okay, sir. We got it. We'd rather go out and start shooting these things than stay here," and I trailed off, thinking about the civilian vehicles lying shattered by 120 rounds. The colonel nodded. "Very well, Sergeant. Get your squad squared away. Armory tent is open to you. Take what you need." "What's the mission, sir?" The colonel stepped over to a map of Maryland. Fort Detrick was the Army's premier bioweapons development facility. It's been closed down a few times now, but they've always continued various projects there. I only know that because we have in our midst a researcher from Detrick. She claims there is valuable intelligence in her research facility that will help us combat this plague. Your job will be to escort her and her team so they can collect that intel and get it back to us. He gestured at a hospital within the fort. "You will infiltrate by Black Hawk. Fort Detrick has gone radio silent, so either their comms equipment is down or more likely they've been overrun." I took a deep breath, thinking about the horde at Quantico. "What's the population of Detrick?" He glanced at me, knowing exactly what I was thinking. "Around 12,000, active military and civilian personnel. Now, a lot of that may have moved to other areas due to July 4th holiday, so we anticipate that only a skeleton staff stayed on." "Hundreds," I said. He nodded. "At least." Now I put my hands on my hips. It seemed to help me think. Maybe that's why officers did it. "I'm gonna need another fire team," I said at last. "We need the weapons." Santiago nodded. "Take whoever volunteers. It is a dangerous raid underground with these things everywhere, and we're still not sure of their full capabilities. Be careful, Sergeant." "Roger that, sir." Okay, that seems like a good place to stop. Like I said, I'll try to do the next reading live and stick it up on my channel, try to give you guys some warning ahead of time. I hope you enjoyed. And if you did enjoy, go ahead and pick up the book off of Amazon. I do other audiobooks. My audiobooks are on my website, jonathanshuerger.com. You can find them there. And if you enjoyed the reading, maybe you'll enjoy those as well. Okay, you guys have a good rest of your day.